Okay, so welcome YouTube. This is a re-recording of Bible study because the stream failed. I love technology. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, we're in Kings, 1 Kings 18. We're going to start in verse 20. Let's review where we left off. So remember, Elijah had to go through the drought and had to live with the widow and her son and had to be fed by a raven by a brook. And all of those things, God was working on him to build up his faith. And remember, at the very end of his stay, or we assume the end of his stay, with the widow and son, the son got sick and passed away. And he had this moment of doubt where he cried out to God, and he was like, why did you do this to these people when you sent me here? I'm a representative of yours. And he fell on top of the guy and started praying that he would come back to life. And sure enough, God revived him and brought him back to life. And all of these things happened so that Elijah his faith could be built, because he has this momentous thing that he has to go through. So he leaves the widow and the son, and he has to report. Remember, he runs into Obadiah, and he has to report to Ahab. And Ahab has been looking for him, probably wanting to kill him, because Ahab blames him for the drought, being that the last thing that God said through Elijah to Ahab was, the drought will not be lifted until it comes out of my mouth. So that's where we are, and now we're getting ready to get to the top of Mount Carmel. We have 400 prophets of Baal, so 400 priests of the house of worship of Satan, and we have 450 and 400 of, let me make sure I got that right, hang on, 400 of Asherah, priests of Asherah, so 850 priests that basically work for the devil. And then all of Israel, he tells Ahab, I want these 850 priests, and I want everybody in the camp of Israel that's capable of coming up on top of the mountain to come up and join me. We start in verse 20. So Ahab sent a message among all the sons of Israel and brought the prophets together at Mount Carmel. Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you hesitate between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, follow him. But the people did not answer him a word. So this is very important, because what it does is it sets up this truth that we, I think, hesitate to acknowledge a lot of times in our life, and that is, there are only two sides. You are either for God or you are against him. I think a lot of people live with their feet in both pools, right? There's the God pool and there's the evil pool. And if you're on the fence, you're working for the devil, because your actions can lead other people away from the path that God wants them to walk on by watching you and living like you. If you're doing that, you're not working for God, you're working against him. So Elijah is saying to these people, look, you're doing a little bit of worship of God, but you're also worshiping Baal. You're also, you're worshiping money, you're worshiping time, you're worshiping health, you're worshiping desires, whatever, all the things that people do today. And he says to them, you got to choose one or the other. There's only two sides. And the people responded the way most people respond, with silence. As in, I don't want to think about it, it makes me uncomfortable, I don't want to do it. Right? Verse 22, it says, then Elijah said to the people, I alone am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. So what he's saying is, look, I brought 450 priests of Satan to the top of this mountain, and I'm going to do battle with them in a way. Those 450 priests are fighting against one man who represents God, right? So let's just say you have a wrestling match and it was 450 to 1, you would put all your money on the 450 that they could take the one, right? And he's setting this up to show that this is not about him, it's about God, and he's standing there as vulnerable as possible, totally relying on the fact that God is going to provide. verse 23, he says, "Now let them give us 2 oxen, and let them choose 1 ox for themselves, and cut it up and place it on the wood, but put no fire under it. And I will prepare the other ox and lay it on the wood, and I will not put a fire under it." Then in verse 24, "You call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, and the God who answers by fire, he is God." And all the people said, "That is a good idea." Right? So everybody around is watching this, and they're like, okay, so I need somebody to stand up and show me the way to God. I need somebody to show me how to live. And this is what the world needs right now. So if you think about this, right, there's a whole bunch of people that know that God is real, but they don't have people that they can look to that are just following God. Almost everybody in the entire world has their feet in both sides, right? And Elijah's standing there, he's saying, look, this is the deal. We're going to build these 2 huge fire things, logs stacked up with a burnt sacrifice on top. Whatever God can light them on fire, that is the God you should follow, right? So he's being an example for these people. He's showing them that God is the way. So Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose 1 ox for yourselves and prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it." Okay? So get it all set up, but don't put any fire. They took the ox, which was given them, and they prepared it and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice and no one answered, and they leaped about the altar which they made. So here we have this scene where, let's just say from 9 o'clock in the morning till noon, they're calling on Baal to light this fire. They're dancing around, they're doing whatever they can trying to get his attention. And then we get a little mocking moment from Elijah, but the mocking moment is sincere because he's trying to raise awareness that an all-powerful God wouldn't be busy or couldn't hear you, right? So in verse 27, "It came about at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, 'Call out with a loud voice, for he is a God. Either he is occupied or gone aside or is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and needs to be awakened.'" Right? So he's kind of poking fun at their God, but he's also making them completely aware. Look, if God is God, if God is omnipotent, he's never sleepy. He's never tired. He's never like, "Oh, I'm bushed. I can't do another thing." He's omnipotent. If God is omnipotent, he'll always hear everything. He's not going to miss a prayer, right? He's not going to miss somebody needing help. He's not going to be over here busy picking daisies and miss that you're calling out because you need him. He's omnipotent. He's everywhere, right? He's all powerful. We need to remind ourselves of that very frequently, right? A lot of times, we don't hear from God. And so we complain like, "Oh, I'm going through this spell where I'm not hearing from God." But he's there. And if you let him know that, instead of complaining about not hearing from him, you let him know that you need to feel his presence, he will make his presence known. It doesn't mean he's going to fix the situation you're in. Look at Elijah. Elijah spent 3 years living with a widow and a son, eating flour and oil. Not exactly a grand time. But he was in constant communication with God. So it came about at noon. He says, hey, maybe be a little louder. Maybe he's, busy or whatever. Verse 20. So they cried with a loud voice and cut themselves according to their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out of them. So they're literally like going just crazy, and they're self-mutilating. Okay, and this is relatable because I think some people believe that they need to self-mutilate to receive forgiveness, and you don't. You don't need to self-mutilate. You don't need to tear yourself down. You don't need to destroy yourself to have God put favor on you or to grant his grace to you. Christ was your substitution for that, right? He was whipped and beaten and nailed to a cross and hung there to die and went down to hell so that you don't have to be whipped and beaten and hung on a cross and go down to hell. All you have to do is turn to God. right? We don't need to destroy our lives, or even the opposite of that, right? We mutilate ourselves in the fact that we think we have to have everything in order to have a relationship with God. Look, nobody's perfect, not even close, right? You don't need to be in the right place to get with God. You need to just get with God, and He will get you to the right place. When midday was past, they raved, a very specific word there. When midday was past, they raved until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, but there was no voice, no one answered, and no one paid attention. So raved is very specific. It means that they just went absolutely crazy. They may have done a child sacrifice. That's not stated here, but that was common back then. It's common in devil worship. They would have torn stuff up. They would have destroyed everything was around. Raved is a very, very strong word. Just shows how crazy and lost these priests were. Verse 30, then Elijah said to all the people, come near to me. So all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord which had been torn down. So this is key, right? He's got to rebuild. Remember I said they raved. They even destroyed the altar that Elijah had built for his demonstration of who God was. There's this important thing here. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord has come, saying, Israel shall be your name. So he takes, in rebuilding the altar, he circles it with 12 stones. The significance of that is Judah's already been separated from the tribe of Israel. That would be 11 stones in one. The reason why he's doing all 12 stones is because even though you're separated, you're still children of God, right? So the way to look at this today is, you're surrounded by different churches, different sets of beliefs, different practices, different styles of worship, different Bibles, different whatever. The idea is, look, as long as a group recognizes that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, that He died for your sins and for your personal independent salvation, then you and whoever else believes that are on the same team, even if you're separated by differences. Verse 32, so with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench around the altar large enough to hold 2 measures of seed. I looked it up, I think it's about 4 gallons. Not 100% sure about that. Verse 33, then he arranged the wood and cut the ox in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, fill 4 pitchers with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And he said, do it a second time, and they did it a second time. And he said, do it a third time, and they did it a third time. Right, so 4 pitchers of water, we'll say they're a gallon each. So he ends up pouring 12 gallons of water all over all this wood, all over the ox that's been cut up, ready to be burnt. There's water everywhere. The water flowed, verse 35, the water flowed around the altar, and he also filled the trench with water. So when I read this, a lot of times I think of a moat, but I think actually what it represents is this fire that was built on this altar actually had a pit around it, and the entire pit was saturated in water, meaning the altar was sitting in water. Verse 36, at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your word. So he's starting out this prayer, right? He's getting ready to have God basically light this altar on fire. And he starts out the prayer and he says, look, you're God. I'm just your servant. I don't want any attention on me. I don't want anything attributed to me. I want the people to know that all I'm doing is what I'm told to do. You told me to build this altar. You told me to put the 12 stones around it. You told me to totally flood it with water and make everything soaking wet. And when it lights on fire, I want you to have the glory. Verse 37, he says, answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their heart back again. What a beautiful prayer. So what he's asking for here is he's saying, look, hear me, because I'm not here for me. I want these people saved. I want this prayer answered where these people will be turned back to you, will have a relationship with you. Anytime that you pray for something, for God to answer it, it has to be in His will, right? So, people always talk about being expectant in prayer, and we're going to get to that in a little bit here, but being expectant in prayer is important, but only if you're praying for the right stuff. This is absolutely a prayer that God would answer. He's saying, I don't want anything. I just want these people to know you. I want these people to be brought into the kingdom, right? In verse 38, we all know what happens, right? If you've ever been in Bible study, if you're ever gone to, church school as a kid, you know the story of Elijah on the altar and it catching on fire. A lot of times when we read the Bible, we water things down in our brain, we forget stuff, we don't remember how intense it was. Look at this in verse 38. It says, "Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust and licked up the water that was in the trench." Right? So the altar didn't just catch on fire. Okay? The fire of the Lord fell from the sky. So I don't know if it was a beam, I don't know if it was flames just falling, whatever. It must have been absolutely awe-inspiring. So this fire falls from the sky. It's not lightning, it's fire from the sky, okay? Fire falls from the sky, and not only does it catch the wood on fire and burn the burnt offering, it burns the stone and the dust around and the water in the trench to the point that everything in that little section was completely burned and gone, non-existent. Verse 39, "When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and they said, 'The Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God.'" So here we have this repetition thing. Anytime you read in the Bible a repetition, it means that it is an unbreakable truth. Jesus usually used this, and He would say, "Truly, truly," right? Like a double dog dare, or what? I don't know, that's a horrible way to put it. But what He's saying is, this cannot be construed or changed in any way. What is about to be said is exactly how it should be said. I'll give you an example. There's Bible verses that you can read, right? Like Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I'm God." Right? You can read that and you can think, wow, I should be quiet, or I should be calm, or I should just stand here and accept things that are happening to me and know that God is God. You can read that in a bunch of different ways, and it can fit a bunch of different scenarios. There is no fitting or changing. He is God. Right? So this repetition is a statement by the people saying, this is the truth. Okay? Look what they said. The Lord, meaning the person in the universe that they know. So God the Father is what we call Him today, right? The Lord, well, with the Trinity. I don't want to confuse anybody. The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. So what we know as Jesus Christ, the Holy Ghost, and God the Father, the unity of the Godhead, that is God. There is no if, ands, or buts, no explanation needed, right? Just, that is pure fact. Then Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, do not let one of them escape." So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. Kind of violent. Old Testament, before Jesus, right? But God will deal with evil when He returns. Don't forget that. And so there are times when God does deal with evil, and people are slain. Slain usually means run through with a sword. You run through their stomach, you lift up one time, and you pull out. Kind of a violent way to go, very bloody way to go. The interesting thing is they were taken down to the brook, and they were slain there, right? The brook would have been dry because of the drought, and there were 450 of them, so it would have run with blood. Very, not picturesque, because picturesque is positive. A very strong picture moment in the Bible there. Verse 41, "Now Elijah said to Ahab, Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of the roar of a heavy shower. Right? So he says to Ahab, it's about to rain. And the interesting thing is, he hasn't killed Ahab. And the reason why he hasn't killed Ahab or hasn't wished him unwell or harm is because Ahab is responsible for leading the people of Israel. And if he can get Ahab to come to God, then the people of Israel will have a much better chance of staying in a relationship with God, because we are affected by our leaders. If you think about the United States, we were founded by God-fearing Christian people. Regardless of what the history books try to tell you today, if you go back and read their actual writings, you know they had a deep love and respect for God. And they firmly believed that they were doing God's work when they founded this country. And we have elected godless leader after godless leader after godless leader, and you look around and you wonder why people are raving and tearing down statues and burning private businesses. It's because we've been led by godless leaders for so long. That is a problem that will be a problem for the entire world. So if you're led by a God-fearing leader, your people tend to be God-fearing people. So it's important that Ahab stays in power and develops a relationship with God and turns away from his wicked ways. So Elijah says to him here in verse 41, he says, go up, eat and drink, right? Go celebrate. The drought's about to end. Go ahead, have a big dinner party. Your people are going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Go celebrate. So Ahab went up to eat and drink, but Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he crouched down on the earth, and he put his face between his knees. So it doesn't say it here, but it says it here. So Elijah went on top of Mount Carmel to pray. Right? And we know because he's in the most prone position you can possibly be in. He's on his knees and he's got his head between his knees, right? That's about as low as you can possibly get without laying on the ground falling asleep. So he's praying. What's he praying for? Well, if you remember from the beginning of this, God said, until it comes from your lips, there won't be any rain. He's praying for rain. Now, because he's doing the will of God, he can expect the prayer to be answered. Just like, pouring the water all over all the wood and in the trench and everywhere, getting everything all sopping wet. He knew God could light it on fire. He knew his prayer would be answered because he's doing the will of God. Well, here, there's not a cloud in the sky. There's been a drought for 3 years. Here he is praying for rain, knowing that it'll be delivered because he's doing the will of God. So check this out. This is awesome. He said to his servant, go up now, look towards the sea. So the servant gets up and he looked and said, there's nothing. I don't see any rain coming. I don't see any cloud anywhere. And he said, go back 7 times. Right? So he's there praying and he says, go look. And the guy comes back and he's like, nah, nothing. No rain anywhere. Go back. No rain anywhere. Go back. Nope, still no cloud. Better keep praying, buddy. No, go look again. Go look one more time. Nope, still nothing. Go look again. For real? You want me to look again? Yeah, go look again. Nope, still nothing. Go look again. Come on, man. No, really, go look again. Nope, still nothing. Go look one more time. He looks one more time. It came about in verse 44, at the 7th time, that the servant said, behold, a cloud as small as a man's hand is coming up from the sea. The servant goes the 7th time and he looks out and he sees this little teeny tiny cloud. And he says, oh, something's happening. Right now, if it were you or me, we'd be like, that cloud is not big enough. There is no way that cloud is going to do anything. Elijah responded. He said, go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down so that a heavy shower does not stop you. Right, so what would happen is, after these long droughts, when it rained, I don't know if you've ever seen like shots of Phoenix, Arizona or somewhere way out west where it's real dry. When it rains real hard, real quick, things get flooded out, right? So they wouldn't stay in the valleys. They would go to a different part during the rainy season, right? So they would leave their area. And he actually had like a winter home. They had like a wintertime home in Jezreel where he would stay to get out of these flood zones. And so Elijah gives him a warning. He says, look, get on your chariot and get to hopping because it's about to be flooded here. In verse 45, in a little while the sky grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy shower, and Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. Right, so Ahab sees that the rain's coming, and he's like, oh goodness, and he gets out of there and goes to his wintertime home where it won't be flooded out. And then we have probably one of the most magnificent verses in all of Kings, and it's verse 46, and nobody pays attention to it. It says, then the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and outran Ahab to Jezreel. You think to yourself, well, I mean, what? So he's going there in front of Ahab to do more teaching, to get Ahab to come around, to make sure that he's changing his ways. That's not what he's doing. What he's doing is giving Ahab a position of honor. You want to talk about being completely humble. This man, Elijah, is nothing but a pure servant of God. So back in the day, when a king would ride a chariot, he would have runners go in front of him. And the runner's job was to make sure there was nothing in the way for the chariot to go down the path, right? They had highways back then just like we do now. They were dirt. So they would go down the path and make sure that there was nothing in the way and that there was no danger. And then when they got to the town ahead of the king, they would announce the king's coming, announce his presence, so the town was ready for the king. Elijah took this role. It's absolutely amazing, right? So here he is. He just battled this man on the mountaintop, so to speak, right? He's actually battling Satan, but Ahab is a representative of Satan at this point. He battles him on the mountaintop and utterly defeats him to the point that Ahab looks like a fool. And Elijah still treats him completely with respect as God instructs us, right? We may not like who is president of the United States at certain times, but it's still the president of the United States. You would still shake their hand. You would still accept an invitation to the White House, etc. Because it is the office of the president of the United States. It was established by God, right? So Elijah stays completely humble even though he's done this huge miracle. Look, I say done this miracle, right? He's been part of this huge miracle that God did. But he stays completely humble and still acts like a servant to the king that he just defeated. That's a great life lesson for us. So, I think a lot of times people who do great things for God get lost because they forget to remain humble. So in your victories, right, give credence only to the people, give credence only to God when you do great things for people. That's the moral there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Y'all have a great rest of the week, and I will see you on Sunday.